Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the TSS Audacity, her weathered hands resting on the command rail as she studied the tactical display. The alien fleet stretched across space like a metallic constellation, thousands of ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Their hulls gleamed with an iridescent sheen that spoke of technology far beyond humanity's apparent capabilities. They're hailing all vessels simultaneously, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported from his communication station. "It's a wideband transmission, ma'am. They want everyone to hear this." Chen nodded, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Put it through. Let's hear what they have to say." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a being that looked almost deliberately alien. The Supreme Commander of the Galactic Empire stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled skin shifting through shades of deep purple and blue. Multiple pairs of eyes blinked in unsynchronized patterns, and when he spoke, his translator rendered his words in a voice that somehow managed to sound both melodious and threatening. "Primitive vessels of Earth, you have entered space claimed by the eternal Galactic Empire. Our civilization spans 10,000 systems and 100,000 years of evolution. You stand before the greatest military force this galaxy has ever known." Chen exchanged glances with her XO, Commander James Sullivan, who was already struggling to maintain his composure. Around the bridge, other crew members bit their lips or covered their mouths, trying desperately to maintain proper military discipline. The Supreme Commander continued, oblivious to the growing mirth among the human crews. "Your technology is infant level. Your ship's barely worthy of being called spacecraft. We have observed your pitiful attempts at faster-than-light travel, your crude weapons, your inefficient power systems. In our magnanimity, we offer you one chance at survival." "Oh, this is going to be good," Sullivan whispered, his shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. "Surrender your vessels immediately. Submit to Imperial authority. Accept your place as a protectorate species, and we will guide your development along appropriate lines. Resist, and we will demonstrate the true power of an advanced civilization." The transmission cut off, replaced by a countdown timer. They had 10 minutes to respond. Chen opened a channel to the other 49 ships in the human fleet. "Well, ladies and gentlemen, I believe the Empire has just given us their opening move. Thoughts?" The response was immediate and overwhelming laughter. Not nervous chuckling or hysterical giggling, but genuine, deep-bellied laughter that spoke of absolute confidence. Did they really just scan us and think we're running on chemical propulsion? Captain Yuki Tanaka of the TSS Defiant wiped tears from her eyes. "Our deception protocols are better than we thought." 10,000 systems. Captain Marcus Williams of the TSS Trickster chimed in. "That's adorable. They think size alone determines military effectiveness." Chen let them laugh for another moment before raising her hand. The channel fell silent, but the amused energy remained palpable. "I believe it's time for our response. Commander Sullivan, please open a channel to our Imperial friends." Sullivan, still grinning, complied. "Channel open, Mom." Chen straightened her uniform and cleared her throat. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries of human military tradition. "Supreme Commander of the Galactic Empire, we have received your ultimatum. On behalf of the Terran Space Service, I must inform you that we find your terms." She paused for effect. Insufficient. She could almost feel the confusion radiating from the Imperial flagship. The Supreme Commander's voice returned, this time with an edge of uncertainty. "You dare to reject our generous offer?" "Oh, we dare," Chen replied, her smile now predatory. "You see, Supreme Commander, there's something you should understand about humans. We don't typically respond well to ultimatums, but more importantly," she glanced at her tactical display, where 50 seemingly primitive vessels faced off against thousands of advanced alien ships, "we really don't like it when someone tries to bully us with overwhelming force." The laughter that followed her words echoed across space, a sound that would haunt the Imperial Commander's dreams for years to come. Deep within the engineering section of the TSS Audacity, Chief Engineer Maya Patil moved through a maze of pipes and conduits that supposedly housed the ship's primitive nuclear reactor. Her movements were precise and practiced as she monitored the holographic readouts that floated invisibly to any external scans. "Imperial sensors are sweeping us again," her assistant, Lieutenant Zhang, reported from his station. "They're really thorough this time. Probably trying to figure out why we're not scared of them." Maya grinned as she adjusted a quantum field harmonizer disguised as a rusty pressure valve. "Let them look. Right now, some poor Imperial technician is probably writing a report about our dangerous radiation leaks and unstable containment protocols." Above them, the ship's internal communications crackled to life with Captain Chen's voice. "Engineering, status report on our nuclear reactor. Running at optimal inefficiency, Captain," Maya responded cheerfully. "I've got it venting just enough radiation to make it look like we're one bad day away from a meltdown. The Empire's sensors should be getting quite a show." The deception went far deeper than just the engine core. Every system on the 50 human vessels had been carefully designed to appear centuries behind their actual technological level. What looked like basic metal hull plating was actually a composite of quantum phase materials and smart alloys. Apparent structural weaknesses were carefully calculated shield emitter points. Even the ship's internal lighting was rigged to flicker occasionally, suggesting power distribution problems. On the Imperial flagship, Senior Technician Zix 427 compiled his scan results with growing disdain. His report to the Supreme Commander painted a picture of technological incompetence that would have made any spacefaring species ashamed. Human vessels appear to rely on highly unstable nuclear fission reactors for power generation. Their containment protocols are insufficient by Imperial safety standards, with radiation leakage detected from multiple points. Hull integrity is compromised in several sections, suggesting poor maintenance practices. Weapon systems appear to be based on primitive chemical propellants and kinetic projectiles. No evidence of energy weapons or advanced shielding technology detected. The Supreme Commander's scales rippled with amusement as he reviewed the findings. These humans are even more primitive than our initial estimates suggested. Their bravado must stem from ignorance rather than capability. Back on the Audacity, Maya and her engineering team continued their carefully choreographed dance of deception. Each time an Imperial scan passed through their section, they adjusted their systems to present exactly the same readings. Consistency was key to maintaining the illusion. "Chief," John called out, "I'm picking up some chatter from the Imperial fleet. Their technicians are having a field day with our outdated technology. One of them just compared us to pre-spaceflight civilizations." Maya leaned against a bulkhead, casually tapping commands into a hidden console that looked like an old pressure gauge. "You know what the funny thing is? Some of this deception tech is actually harder to build than the real thing. Do you know how difficult it is to make a quantum singularity drive look like a malfunctioning nuclear reactor?" The engineering crew shared knowing looks. They had spent years perfecting these disguise systems, testing them against every known form of scanning technology. The Empire's sensors were sophisticated, but they were looking for sophisticated technology. They never thought to look for technology so advanced it could perfectly mimic primitive systems. Captain Chen's voice came through again. "Engineering, the Empire's fleet is shifting formation. Looks like they're preparing to teach us a lesson about respecting our betters. Are we ready to disappoint them?" Maya checked her real status displays, hidden beneath layers of holographic camouflage. The containment field around their true power core, a miniature singularity, was operating at peak efficiency. The quantum phase generators were primed. Every system was running perfectly while appearing to barely function. "Ready and waiting, Captain," she reported. "Though I should warn you, according to Imperial scans, we have about a 60% chance of our reactor exploding if we try any sudden maneuvers." Chen's laugh echoed through the compartment. "Well, we wouldn't want to disappoint their sensors, would we? Stand by, engineering. Let's see how long it takes them to realize they're not the only ones who can keep a secret." The first shot from the Imperial fleet was meant to be a demonstration of power. A lance of pure energy, bright enough to rival a small sun, streaked across space toward the TSS Defiant. Captain Yuki Tanaka watched it approach with the calm demeanor of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. Impact in 3 seconds, her tactical officer announced. All systems nominal. Quantum phase shift ready. The beam struck the Defiant's hull and passed through it as if the ship were made of smoke. Behind the vessel, the energy dispersed harmlessly into space. On the bridge of the Imperial flagship, the Supreme Commander's scales shifted to a pale green of confusion. "Impossible," he muttered. "Fire again. Full power this time." The Empire's fleet responded with a coordinated barrage. Hundreds of energy weapons discharged simultaneously, turning space into a web of destructive light. The human vessels seemed to dance through the assault, each beam either passing through them or glancing off their supposedly primitive hulls with minimal effect. "Well," Captain Chen's voice crackled across the human fleet's secure channel, "I believe they've had their turn. Time to show them what primitive weapons can do. All ships, execute battle plan Odysseus." The 50 human vessels broke formation, splitting into smaller groups of 5. Their movements appeared chaotic to Imperial tactical computers, which struggled to predict their attack patterns. Then the first human ship fired. What the Empire's sensors registered as a simple kinetic projectile launcher was actually a magnetically accelerated quantum-tipped warhead. The missile crossed the space between fleets at a fraction of light speed, its warhead shifting through quantum states faster than Imperial shields could adapt. The first Imperial cruiser disappeared in a flash of light that had nothing to do with conventional explosions. The quantum warhead had simply convinced a portion of the cruiser's mass that it should exist in a different dimension. "Target down," Tanaka reported calmly. Their shields didn't even register the attack. Moving to secondary targets. The human fleet's response escalated. What appeared to be crude railguns fired projectiles that split into swarms of smart submunitions. Imperial point defense systems, calibrated for energy weapons, struggled to track the physical objects. More Imperial ships discovered that their advanced shields offered little protection against weapons they dismissed as obsolete. On the bridge of the Audacity, Commander Sullivan watched the tactical display with satisfaction. "They're trying to adapt their shields," he reported. "Looks like they're attempting to reconfigure for kinetic impacts." Captain Chen nodded. "Time to switch things up then. All ships, initiate weapons pattern Delta. Let's show them why humanity never relied on a single type of weapon." The next wave of human attacks combined their primitive kinetic weapons with quantum phase technology. Projectiles would phase through Imperial shields, becoming solid again only after they'd penetrated the barrier. The Empire's technological superiority had become a liability. Their complex defense systems couldn't adapt quickly enough to threats their designers had never imagined. An Imperial destroyer exploded spectacularly as its power core was breached. The Supreme Commander watched in growing horror as his perfectly arranged formation began to break apart. His fleet's responses, based on millennia of tactical doctrine, proved useless against an enemy that ignored conventional warfare's rules. "This is impossible," he snarled. "Their technology is inferior. We scanned their ships ourselves." A message flashed across his command screen. Text only, encoded in Imperial Standard. Preliminary analysis complete. Human vessels appear to be utilizing previously unknown technological principles. Recommendation: immediate tactical retreat for strategic reassessment. Before he could respond, another human attack struck home. This time, they didn't bother with the pretense of primitive weapons. A human vessel simply phased partially into higher dimensional space, allowing it to exist briefly in the same space as an Imperial cruiser. When it phased back, the cruiser's atomic structure had been fatally disrupted. "All ships," the Supreme Commander's voice shook slightly as he gave the order, "fall back to secondary positions. Prepare to deploy planetary assault weapons. Let's see how these humans handle real power." In response, a burst of laughter echoed across all Imperial communication channels. They still didn't understand. The humans were just getting started. Admiral Elizabeth Santos sat in her office aboard the TSS Prometheus, Earth's most advanced research vessel, disguised as its most dilapidated support ship. On her desk, a holographic display showed the unfolding battle, while scattered around her were artifacts that told the true story of humanity's preparation for this moment. 20 years, she mused, picking up a piece of alien technology recovered from a crash site in 2157. 20 years since we intercepted their first transmission. 20 years of preparing for this exact moment. Her assistant, Dr. Marcus Webb, entered with a fresh data tablet. The Empire's trying to figure out how we're doing it. Their quantum analysis teams are going crazy trying to reconcile their sensor readings with what they're actually seeing. Santos smiled, remembering the day humanity first realized they weren't alone in the galaxy. The Empire's communications had been careless, broadcasting their technological capabilities, their military doctrine, even their cultural superiority complex across space. Instead of revealing themselves, humanity had listened, learned, and prepared. Status report from the engineering teams, she asked, setting down the alien artifact. Chief Patel's quantum phase technology is performing beyond expectations. The Empire still hasn't figured out that our radiation leaks are actually controlled quantum field emissions. Their sensors are interpreting the data exactly as we predicted they would. The battle display showed another Imperial vessel disappearing in a flash of light. The humans had developed their technology along a completely different path than the Empire, focusing on manipulation of quantum states and dimensional physics, rather than conventional energy weapons and shields. "Show me the Empire's current scan attempts," Santos ordered. A new hologram appeared, showing the complex web of sensor beams washing over the human fleet. The Empire was throwing everything they had at the problem, trying to understand how their supposedly primitive opponents were achieving the impossible. "They're looking for advanced energy signatures," Webb noted. "Shield harmonics, weapon power systems, all the standard markers of their type of technology. They still haven't realized we don't use any of those things." Santos nodded, because they can't imagine a civilization developing along a different technological path than their own. Their empire spans 10,000 systems, but they all followed the same technological development curve. They've never encountered anyone who took a different route. She pulled up another display, this one showing the true nature of human vessels, where the Empire had focused on harnessing energy in ever more powerful ways. Humanity had learned to manipulate the fabric of reality itself. Their ships didn't need massive power cores because they used controlled microsingularities. Their weapons didn't require enormous energy banks because they worked by altering fundamental physical laws rather than brute force. "Signal from the front line," Webb announced. Captain Chen reports the Empire is pulling back, regrouping around their capital ships. They're trying to analyze our capabilities before committing to another attack. "They won't figure it out," Santos said with certainty. "Not in time, anyway. Our entire technological base operates on principles their science doesn't even recognize. They're still trying to measure our power output while we're manipulating dimensional barriers." A new alert flashed across the tactical display. The Empire was deploying their planet-killer weapons, massive vessels designed to destroy entire worlds with concentrated energy beams. "Right on schedule," Santos smiled. "They always resort to brute force when confronted with something they don't understand. Signal all ships. Prepare for Phase 2 of the operation." "Do you think they'll ever realize?" Webb asked, watching as the human fleet adjusted their formation. "That we could have revealed ourselves years ago, could have shared technology, could have joined their empire as equals." Santos stood, walking to the viewport where she could see the distant flashes of battle. "They gave us no choice. Their first transmissions made it clear. They don't want equals. They want subjects. So we let them think we were primitive, let them believe we were defenseless, and prepared for the day they would try to civilize us." She turned back to her desk, reaching for the command interface. "Signal the fleet. Execute Operation Looking Glass. Let's show the Empire what humanity can really do when we stop pretending to be primitive. The space between the fleets had become a graveyard of Imperial vessels, their once pristine hulls now twisted by forces their designers never imagined possible. Captain Chen's wolf pack of 5 ships moved through the debris with practiced precision, their formation drawn from centuries-old submarine warfare tactics. Contact, bearing 035. Lieutenant Rodriguez called out. Imperial heavy cruiser, trying to swing around our flank. Chen didn't need to issue explicit orders. Her squadron had trained together for years, practicing maneuvers that would appear chaotic to outside observers, but followed patterns as old as naval warfare itself. The TSS Audacity and her sister ships shifted like a school of fish, each captain instinctively knowing their role. Interesting, Commander Sullivan noted, studying his tactical display. They're still trying to maintain their rigid formation protocols. Look at how they move in perfect geometric patterns. The Imperial cruiser, flanked by its escort vessels, maintained a mathematically precise diamond formation as it approached. Their movements were textbook perfect, exactly as their combat doctrine demanded, and completely predictable. Sending targeting data to the wolf pack, Rodriguez announced. Time to scatter them. The 5 human vessels suddenly split apart, each taking a different vector. To Imperial sensors, it looked like their formation had broken under pressure. The reality was far more sophisticated. Each human ship was executing their part of a complex 3-dimensional ballet, creating deliberate gaps that would tempt Imperial ships into fatal mistakes. The Empire took the bait. Their cruiser group accelerated into what they perceived as a weakness in the human formation, their perfect diamond pattern unchanged. They never saw the trap until it was too late. Captain Tanaka's voice crackled over the tactical channel. Executing crossing the T, 21st century style. The Defiant emerged from behind a piece of debris, its quantum phase systems allowing it to pass through solid matter. The Imperial formation suddenly found itself bisected by a ship that, according to their sensors, couldn't possibly be there. The confusion disrupted their carefully maintained formation. Now, Chen ordered quietly. The human wolf pack struck from 5 different directions simultaneously. Each ship targeted a different section of the Imperial formation, their attacks perfectly synchronized despite appearing random. The Empire's rigid command structure worked against them, each ship commander waiting for orders from their superior rather than reacting to the immediate threat. In the Empire's command center, the Supreme Commander watched in growing frustration as another elite cruiser group fell into chaos. Why can't they maintain formation? He demanded. Where is their coordination? His tactical officer, scales now a pale yellow of distress, attempted to explain. Sir, the humans, they don't follow any recognized combat doctrine. Each of their ships operates independently, but somehow maintains perfect coordination with the others. Our predictive algorithms can't track their movements because there's no pattern to analyze. There's always a pattern. The Supreme Commander insisted. They're primitives. Their tactics can't be more advanced than their technology. But he was wrong. While the Empire had spent millennia perfecting formation combat and overwhelming force, humanity had been practicing something far more dangerous. Adaptation. Each human captain had the authority to make tactical decisions without waiting for orders. Their coordinated chaos was the result of countless hours of training, where they learned to read each other's movements and react accordingly. Chen watched as the Imperial formation finally broke apart completely. Their cruiser, trying to maintain its position relative to its escorts, found itself caught in a crossfire it couldn't escape. The ship's advanced shields, designed to repel energy weapons, proved useless against attacks coming from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Wolfpack, form up on my position, Chen ordered as the Imperial cruiser disappeared in a flash of quantum disruption. Time to find our next target. As her ships regrouped, moving in a pattern that would appear random to outside observers, Chen couldn't help but smile. The Empire had spent so long being the most advanced civilization in known space that they'd forgotten the most important lesson of warfare. It's not the technology that wins battles, it's how you use it. Contact. Rodriguez called out again. Multiple signatures. They're bringing in their heavy units. Good, Chen replied, her smile turning predatory. Signal the other wolf packs. Let's show them what happens when you let humans get creative. The Empire's planet killer ships emerged from hyperspace like mechanical leviathans, their massive forms dwarfing even the largest regular vessels in the Imperial fleet. Each one stretched 20 kilometers from bow to stern, their hulls bristling with energy collectors designed to channel the power of a small star into a single devastating beam. Admiral Santos watched them arrive from her command center on the Prometheus. Right on schedule, they always resort to their biggest guns when backed into a corner. The tactical display showed 3 planet killers moving into position, their escort fleet arranging themselves in concentric rings of protection. The Empire was done playing games. These weapons could reduce Earth to molten slag in minutes. All ships, this is Admiral Santos. Operation Looking Glass is now in effect. Execute Protocol Thermopylae. Across the human fleet, engineers like Maya Patel initiated sequences they'd rehearsed countless times, but never tested in actual combat. The quantum phase generators, previously used to avoid damage, would now be turned to a more aggressive purpose. They're powering up their main weapons, Webb reported, his eyes fixed on the energy readings. The output is astronomical. Each beam could crack a planet's crust. Santos nodded calmly. That's the problem with the Empire. They never learned the art of subtlety. Signal Captain Chen's wolf pack. They have the honor of first response. The planet killer's energy collectors began to glow, drawing in power from their artificial stellar cores. The Empire had designed these weapons to be unstoppable, believing that raw power could overcome any defense. They never considered that someone might turn that power against them. Energy spike. Webb's voice rose with urgency. They're firing. 3 beams of pure destruction lanced out from the planet killers, each powerful enough to vaporize a continent. They converged on the position of Chen's wolf pack, the Empire clearly intent on eliminating the most troublesome human ships first. Captain Chen's voice came over the command channel, cool and collected. Executing Thermopylae maneuver. All ships, phase shift to calculated coordinates. The 5 human vessels seemed to shimmer as their quantum phase technology activated. Instead of trying to avoid the incoming beams, they positioned themselves directly in their path. Their hulls, previously configured to let energy pass through them, now did something entirely different. Quantum mirrors engaged. Maya's voice reported from the Audacity. Dimensional fold is stable. Ready for redirection. The planet killer beams struck the human ships and bent. The quantum phase technology didn't just redirect the energy. It folded space itself, creating a loop that sent the beams back along their original path. The Empire had just launched their most powerful attack directly at their own vessels. By the Eternal. The Supreme Commander's exclamation echoed across all channels as he watched 3 beams of planet-killing energy surge back toward his fleet. The planet killers, designed to deliver massive energy attacks, but not to receive them, had no defense against their own power. The first beam struck its source ship dead center. For a moment, the massive vessel seemed to glow from within, its hull becoming translucent as overwhelming energy coursed through its systems. Then it simply ceased to exist, converted entirely to energy by its own weapon. The second and third beams found similar marks, their devastating power amplified by the quantum manipulation of the human ships. Where 3 planet killers had been, now there was nothing but expanding clouds of plasma and debris. In the silence that followed, Admiral Santos opened a channel to the Imperial fleet. Supreme Commander, I believe it's time we had a discussion about the true nature of technological advancement. Your empire has spent millennia perfecting the art of channeling enormous amounts of energy. We, on the other hand, learned something far more valuable, the art of using an opponent's strength against them. She paused, allowing the message to sink in. Would you like to continue this demonstration, Or shall we discuss terms that don't involve ultimatums? The Imperial fleet's response was immediate and chaotic. Ships breaking formation, commanders calling for retreat, all semblance of their vaunted discipline evaporating in the face of weapons they couldn't comprehend being turned against them. Signal from the Imperial flagship, Webb announced, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. They're requesting a temporary cessation of hostilities to discuss diplomatic alternatives. Santos smiled. Inform Captain Chen she can stand down the wolf packs. I believe the Empire is finally ready to learn some manners. In the aftermath of the Planet Killer's destruction, the Imperial command structure began to unravel like a poorly woven tapestry. Ship captains, trained for generations to follow strict hierarchical protocols, found themselves facing an enemy that defied every principle of their military doctrine. Fascinating, Dr. Webb remarked, studying the behavioral analysis displays aboard the Prometheus. Their entire command structure is based on the assumption that technological superiority equals tactical superiority. When that assumption broke down, everything else followed. Admiral Santos finished. Their entire civilization is built on that premise. Each system they conquered, each species they subjugated, all of them were demonstrably inferior by Imperial technological standards. The tactical displays showed Imperial ships moving in increasingly erratic patterns. Some maintained their positions, waiting for orders that would never come. Others attempted to adapt, trying to mimic the fluid movements of the human wolf packs, but lacking the training and initiative to do so effectively. Captain Chen's voice came through on the command channel. Admiral, we're picking up some interesting communications from the Imperial fleet. Their ship commanders are arguing with each other. Seems they can't agree on who has the authority to make decisions with their command structure in chaos. Santos leaned forward, watching as the mighty Imperial fleet began to tear itself apart from within. They've never faced this situation before. Their entire military is designed around following orders from above, but those orders don't work anymore. Each commander who tries to adapt is technically violating Imperial doctrine. The evidence was clear on the tactical displays. An Imperial cruiser group would spot an opportunity, begin to move to exploit it, then halt mid-maneuver as their commander second-guessed the decision to act without explicit orders. The human wolf packs picked these hesitant vessels apart with almost casual ease. Message from Captain Tanaka, Webb announced. The Defiant sensors are picking up some interesting readings. Several Imperial ships appear to be powering down their primary weapons. They're going passive. Santos nodded slowly. Individual commanders making survival decisions. They're beginning to realize that their standard tactics are getting them killed. Evolution in action. Adapt or die. Aboard the Audacity, Chief Engineer Maya Patel was monitoring the quantum phase readings from the Imperial ships. Captain, you need to see this. She called up to the bridge. Some of their ships are trying to modify their shields to mimic our phase technology. They're not having much success, but the attempt itself shows they're capable of learning. Chen finished. When they're desperate enough to throw out their precious doctrine. Admiral, are you seeing this? Indeed, Santos replied. This is the real test, not of their technology, but of their ability to change. Open a channel to all Imperial vessels. When she spoke, her voice carried across space to every ship in the Imperial fleet. Attention Imperial commanders. You've witnessed today that your technological superiority, while impressive, is not absolute. More importantly, you've seen that rigid adherence to doctrine in the face of a changing battlefield leads only to defeat. She paused, letting the message sink in. Right now, each of you has a choice to make. You can continue to wait for orders from a command structure that doesn't know how to handle this situation, or you can do what humans have done for millennia. Adapt, improvise, and overcome. The response was not immediate. Some Imperial ships maintained their positions, their commanders unwilling or unable to break from their training. Others began to move with more purpose, attempting to coordinate with nearby vessels based on the immediate tactical situation rather than predetermined formations. Look at that. Webb pointed to a section of the tactical display. That destroyer group. They're actually attempting to form their own wolf pack. They're not very good at it, but they're trying. Santos smiled. The Empire's greatest weakness wasn't their technology. It was their inability to imagine that someone could develop along a different path. Now they're being forced to imagine, to think, to adapt. The question is, can a civilization built on rigid hierarchy learn to value independence? As if in answer, more Imperial ships began to break from their traditional formations, their commanders choosing survival over doctrine. The mighty Imperial fleet was learning, painfully and imperfectly, the lesson humanity had learned long ago. True strength lies not in following orders, but in knowing when to break them. The Imperial flagship's hangar bay dwarfed the human shuttle that landed within it. Captain Chen, accompanied by Admiral Santos, stepped onto Imperial deck plating for the first time. The Supreme Commander waited for them, his scales now a muted gray of uncertainty, rather than their earlier commanding purple. "I must admit," he said, his translator struggling to convey the complex mixture of emotions in his voice, "in 10,000 years of Imperial history, no one has ever laughed at our ultimatum before." "That was your first mistake," Santos replied, her diplomatic uniform crisp and perfect. "You assumed fear was the only rational response to overwhelming force. Humans tend to have a different reaction to bullies, regardless of their size." They walked together toward the flagship's conference room, passing Imperial crews who tried not to stare at the humans who had dismantled their fleet's reputation in a single battle. The Supreme Commander's guards maintained a careful distance, close enough to protect, but far enough to show respect rather than threat. "Your technology," the Supreme Commander began carefully, "it's unlike anything in our archives. We assumed, seeing your nuclear reactors and chemical propulsion." Chen smiled. "You saw exactly what we wanted you to see. Humanity intercepted your first transmissions 20 years ago. We learned everything about your technology, your tactics, your expectations. Then we developed our systems specifically to counter them." The conference room's viewport showed the aftermath of battle. Imperial ships now moved in looser formations, many of them attempting to incorporate lessons learned at great cost. Among them, human wolf packs patrolled with practiced ease, no longer bothering to hide their true capabilities. But why? The Supreme Commander's scales shifted through patterns of confusion. Why hide your advancement? You could have joined the Empire as equals. "No," Santos corrected him gently. "We couldn't have. Your first transmissions made that clear. The Empire doesn't accept equals. It only recognizes superior and inferior civilizations. We chose to appear inferior while preparing to demonstrate just how flawed that worldview is." Chief Engineer Maya's voice came through on a secure channel. "Admiral, we're detecting some interesting modifications to the Imperial ships. Several of their engineers have begun experimenting with quantum field theory. They're crude attempts, but the principles are sound." Santos nodded slightly. "Good. They're learning. Sometimes the best way to teach is to demonstrate." She turned back to the Supreme Commander. "Your empire has stood for 10,000 years, unchanging, unchallenged. But the galaxy doesn't reward stagnation. It rewards adaptation." The Supreme Commander was quiet for a long moment, watching his fleet attempt to incorporate human tactics. "What are your terms?" "First," Chen said, "no more ultimatums. The next time you encounter a new civilization, try asking nicely. You might be surprised what you learn." "Second," Santos continued, "we want cultural exchange programs, not just technology sharing, though we're willing to discuss that too, but exchange of ideas, of different ways of thinking. Your empire has much to teach us about unity across vast distances. We have much to teach you about the value of individual initiative." The Supreme Commander's scales shifted to a new color, one his species used to indicate acceptance of new ideas. "And third," Santos smiled, Third, we want your empire to remember this day, not as a humiliation, but as a lesson. The galaxy is vast, and there are many paths to advancement. True civilization isn't about enforcing uniformity. It's about learning from differences. As if to emphasize her point, a group of Imperial ships attempted a wolf-pack maneuver nearby. Their formation was imperfect, their timing off, but they were trying. Learning. Adapting. Perhaps, the Supreme Commander said slowly, "It is time for the Eternal Empire to become the Evolving Empire instead." Chen and Santos exchanged glances. This was why humanity had chosen their approach, not to destroy the Empire, but to teach it. Sometimes the best way to break down walls was to show how unnecessary they were. One last question, the Supreme Commander asked. "When we first arrived, when we made our ultimatum, why did your crews laugh?" Santos's smile widened. "Because, Supreme Commander, in all your empire's vast history, you never learned the most important lesson humanity discovered millennia ago. The more someone tries to impress you with their power, the more likely it is they're overcompensating for something." And in that moment, something unprecedented happened in the history of the Galactic Empire. The Supreme Commander laughed too.